Hi guys, just quickly I want to share with you what I've been enjoying lately. I've been really enjoying is this book here called The Lost Envoy, the Tarot Deck of Austin Osman Spare. Austin Osman Spare was a British occultist, I believe. He was based in London. He was an artist, and he created his tarot deck around about the same time as Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Colman Smith did theirs. In fact, he was a contemporary of Waite, Smith, and of Crowley. The difference is that while the Rider Waite Smith became the first mass-published, mass-produced, available to the public tarot deck, which changed the course of history for, people like us, this particular deck went underground, and this idea of how life or how tarot would have been so different for us had history turned the other way, where his tarot deck became public instead of going to obscurity. That just, my mind is just blown. So his tarot decks is a mixture of Marseille Major Arcana with playing card Cartomancy, as you can see here. But I will talk a bit more about this book in a separate video so that I can get into, so I can spend a bit more time just sharing with you my thoughts. So that's that one there. And then I have a book here that I finally purchased. I have came across this book a couple of times, recommended by people in more than one occasion, I think 2 or 3 times, before I heard about it again on Zach's channel, The Tiger's Abyss. And so when I Googled it, and then I saw the design here, very medieval, almost Gnostic Christian sort of, I don't know, I mean, to my very untrained eyes, looked very almost medieval Catholic. And it is something I recognize, I suppose, growing up Catholic, at least culturally. And studying Western esotericism and tarot, I don't often see images that I can recognize from my own personal life. And so this one stayed with me. A viewer, somebody who watched my video, posted a comment recommending this book once, and I kind of remember Gareth Knight, that name. And then so when Zach mentioned it again, I thought, oh, that sounds familiar. And when I Googled it and I saw this cover on Amazon, I thought, okay, I thought, okay, this is the 3rd time I heard about this. Now, this is not the only Qabalistic book that's ever been recommended to me, but for whatever reason, the one by Dion Fortune and this one stuck in my mind. I don't know why the others haven't stayed in my memory. I sort of click on my list on Amazon just to bookmark these books, but none of them really ever stayed with me. This one, on the other hand, and Dion Fortune's book stayed with me. And so, yeah, so I have only started reading this, and I'm not quite sure when I'm going to finish it, and so, but definitely I've written some notes there. One thing that this book did is that in the foreword, in 2001 foreword, this book was written in 1965, and he wrote a foreword in the 70s and in 2001, because this was reprinted, I think, 3 times. So 65, 75, 93, and 2001. This is the 2001 edition, I think, by Weiser, Red Wheel Weiser. And what he said in his foreword is that for a book this big and for a subject that is so narrow in terms of interest, this kind of interest is considered narrow, I suppose. Apparently altering the text, having a revised text, is very difficult, almost impossible. And I don't quite understand why that is. So if anybody have any idea as to why that is, please do let me know down below, because I'm quite curious. What that helped me understand, though, is that so far I've been approaching these texts with much frustrations, because every time I look at a book, it's 40, 50 years old, 20, 30 years old. And I feel like in modern texts, in terms of modern texts, proposing theories or hypotheses or whatever, several years is a long time. You constantly have to make sure that you're reading the latest revision. And so when I look at these texts and see 30, 40 years, I get really frustrated. However, what he said there helped me put this into a different light. I am now, because of what he said there, here in this book, I am now beginning to try to see these texts like a historical text rather than a text in the modern textbook sense of the word. And so historical text means I am now approaching it like I am approaching reading, say, sacred text like the Bible. I then have to remind myself when this was written and the fact that it has never been revised since. In a way that I also read original work by Jung, for example, which was written in the early 1900s, which is a really long time ago. In his case, he had the luxury of, because it's, I suppose, because they're considered scientific papers, he had the luxury of revising things up to, I don't know, his death in the 60s, I suppose. So up to the 1960s, Jung have managed, from what I can see, the limited material that I've read so far, it seems like he was able to revise his text up to the 60s. But these things are very, it's tricky in my mind to think of these like historical texts. But effectively, if these guys can't change or alter or revise their work, which they've done in 65, 40, 50 years later, if you're stuck with an idea, I mean, ideas move all the time. There is no way someone who thought one thing in one period of their life, 50 years later, often revisions have to be made. And so, yeah, to put it short and in summary, it is an eye opener for me to tell myself that I have to approach these like historical texts rather than like textbooks. And then I have also recently acquired this again because of chats with Zach of Tiger's Abyss. He mentioned this because he is in the middle of studying tarot at the moment, esoteric tarot. And I have heard about this deck a long time ago when I first started tarot 4 years ago. But at the time, because I was concerned more over finding a deck that fits my personal aesthetic, because I've just started learning, I wasn't interested in decks which, you know, didn't fit me aesthetically where I was at the time personally. I was interested in historical tarot, so I started collecting Marseille decks and a variety of other historical tarot, even though I didn't start using them until only recently, years later. This was sort of dropped off my list because I didn't like the aesthetic and I didn't quite understand where it sits in the history of tarot, because this, I believe, was in 1930s, I think. So it's a 20th century tarot, basically, up post Golden Dawn. And in my mind at the time, historical tarot is pre-Golden Dawn. And so I believe he is an Eastern European, a Czech esotericist or magician. Please pardon me if I use the term esotericist and magician interchangeably for the moment. So I learned that this is actually his design, is actually the personal deck, I think, if I understand this correctly, of this magician Lasenic. And so given my current interest in understanding the history of tarot from not only the point of art history, cultural history, but also from the point of esoteric history, and perhaps from the point of the voices of those magicians themselves, I find it quite intriguing. Like the Austin Osman Spare here, like that one there, you know, like this one here, this is Austin Osman Spare's own deck. I find it quite fascinating to understand how this particular magician considers tarot through his own creation of his own tarot deck. So this is that. And last but not least, I have also, a long time ago, so this is more like, I don't know, going back to those things that stayed in the back of my mind that I haven't really had the chance or mental space to explore further until recently, is this Dore Tarot Bible. I was looking for a Dore tarot because I heard there is a Dore tarot when I first started tarot and started hanging around Eclectic Tarot Forum. If you were there in 2014, you might remember there was a creator whose Dore Bible Tarot or Dore Tarot was embroiled in litigation because someone has pirated her images. I mean, the images of Dore etching is currently in public domain. So I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue was perhaps that she has composed them. She has curated the images of Gustave Dore for her own deck, and then somebody in Eastern Europe started printing the exact same deck that she created. And I can't remember who she was or what happened to that, or whether this is her or his tarot deck. I'm not sure. But when I Googled Dore Tarot, I found two Dore Bible Tarot, this one and another one, which design I don't really like. I've Googled, or I did a search on YouTube to see if anybody else has a Dore themed tarot, and I can only manage to find one person, French-speaking person, who posted a French-speaking video, a flip through of this tarot. He also showed a Bible illustrated by Dore and a book, Divine Comedy, illustrated by Dore. I've shown you in a video I posted maybe last year or the year before of my own copy of Paradise Lost with Dore's etching in it, especially one depicting Lucifer. I think it is the most beautiful depiction of Lucifer I have ever laid my eyes on. And also Dore has this skill of etching black and white so finely and putting the contrast between light and dark so beautifully that when you look at the white part of his etching, sometimes I feel as if I'm looking directly at a light. Like, for example, if he etched the sun, I literally felt like I was looking at the sun, even though in fact what I'm looking at is actually the white of the paper that his etching expose or doesn't cover, like this one here. So you can imagine, unfortunately, if you're a Dore enthusiast, this will not be the best reproduction of his work, because you can see here the etching is missing. Like, the etching is not missing but obscured because the images are too small, in my opinion. You can see that the lines are not visible. Because the lines aren't visible, that dramatic effect that Dore etching often have, in my opinion, is obscured. So the cardstock is amazingly matte and soft, and it feels like naked paper. It almost feels like the vintage Rider Blue box or Rider Yellow box, that naked. And of course this is printed in Europe and Poland. I say of course because it seems like this kind of, it feels to me like elegant cardstock like this often originated in Europe. So this was, I think according to the box here, it's printed in Poland. Yeah. So DoreBibleTarot.net, Great Bible Tarot by Gustave Dore. It is from Gustave Dore Bible Illustrations. So this is created from just the one book, the Bible that he illustrated. So all of these, I can see why it's called Dore Bible Tarot rather than Dore Tarot. There is another Dore Bible Tarot, which aesthetic I don't really like because it's not as elegant as this, in my opinion, by Moonchild. And she placed different images for different archetype. For example, for the magician, she put Aaron and Moses, while here the magician is depicted as Jesus walking on water, and it's entitled God the Father, which I thought was interesting. So I suppose the magician is the manifestation of larger forces, I suppose, in us, perhaps. I don't know. So Wisdom of Solomon is the justice. And I really like this because if you remember the story of the Bible, not the Bible, sorry, the story of that baby being carved into two. And even in the New Vision Tarot, you have a baby behind the throne of the King of Swords, which is often the embodiment of just the King of Swords. And so here justice as the story of how King Solomon ordered the baby to be cut in half for the two ladies, the two women, the two mothers, or the two women who claim to be the mother, each claiming to be the mother of the baby. And the one who surrendered the baby was ultimately granted the acknowledgement that she is the real mother, because King Solomon said that, love ultimately is not self-serving. Love is ultimately not what I can get, but love is ultimately to do whatever it takes, even if you stab yourself in a way, to make sure that the object of your love is safe. Is that other-centeredness in the act of loving. So I really quite like that. Now, I love the cardstock. I love the way they take the images and the story behind the images and sort of transpose that into the tarot archetype. What I don't like is the images aren't as crisp. The letterings aren't as crisp as I feel they could be. Having said that, there is a tarot deck by Seven, I think, who's completely distorted, in my opinion. The images were really badly stretched that a lot of people like. And the 25th anniversary of the Enchanted Tarot, which images I felt was a little low definition, low def, a lot of people like. So this is definitely not as blurry as the Enchanted Tarot. It's just that it's not crisp, because I've seen Dore's etching and I have set my own expectation there, and I think it might be an unrealistic expectation. So because the images here are smaller, a lot of the definition is lost. And instead of the lines, like a lot of dark lines here, a lot of black lines here, and the absence of lines over there, creating this illusion of light literally shining through, like as if you are looking as if you're looking at a direct sunlight. What you see here is just a black and white picture. This is a good example here. If you see the etching one by one here, like little black lines all over here, for whatever reason, that sun looked like, it looks very real. I've never seen as realistic. Makes me look like I'm looking at a direct source of light, basically. And I have to convince myself that what I'm looking at there is actually the white of the paper, or the white of the cardstock in this instance. But here, it doesn't look as dramatic here, because the image is smaller, and so the definition is lower. It's almost as if they are all crowded together so that you don't, you can't see. You can't see as well. The Book of Life, like this one here, this would have been in its original size. You can imagine this one here, for example. See that etching here? This is what I mean. The fine lines here, I believe, plays a huge part in Dore's aesthetic. And you imagine this in higher def and bigger, you could actually see light shining through there. Like literally, it looks as if you're looking at something shining. And that's judgment, and I really quite like that, because I have no idea what the Book of Life is, but you see the new world coming, the old world is receding, and the new world is coming. We are awakening into we are awakening into a new reality, a new realization, a new way of looking at the world, a new existence, a new birth. It's rebirth. So yeah, I will leave it right there, and I will do a flip through of the deck, and probably a book of the book as well, separately. So I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.